This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
On the 13th of December 1945, a young 22-year-old woman shuffled into an execution chamber. Her legs and arms were shackled, and she was helped up the 13 steps of the wooden scaffold and onto the gallows. Irma Grazer was one of the most harrowing women of the concentration camps of World War II, and her name, still 80 years on, carries a sense of dread and fear. But why was witnessing her execution much worse than you would probably have imagined? Irma Grazer fell into the lure of the Nazi Party. Her father was allegedly anti-Nazi, but she decided to join the youth groups for teenage girls, such as the League of German Maidens. This upset her father, but her later work inside the concentration camps would push their relationship to breaking point. She did not have the greatest early life. Her mother died after discovering her father's affair, and Irma left school at 14 to work at a dairy factory. She held other jobs, including a shop assistant, but she then wanted a career as a nurse. But this choice was skewed by her Nazi mentality. She didn't apply to work in any hospital, but she became an apprentice aide to an assistant nurse at the Hohenlinchen Sanatorium, a place where SS officers received treatment after being injured on the front lines of World War II. But she was let go from this in 1941, and the SS doctor in charge, Karl Gebhardt, the personal doctor of Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, gave Irma Grazer a reference to use to possibly work inside the concentration camps. When she was 18, she applied to work as a concentration camp guard inside of Ravensbrück, an all-female camp near to Berlin. She completed her 3-week training, and she demonstrated brutality, which was completely shocking. She was at the time not even 20 years old, and she would then go on to work inside of Auschwitz, after the camp was expanded to include a specific women's camp. Irma Grazer became known for her brutality, and overseeing the punishment detail, she patrolled with a pistol, and she would shoot inmates at random. She was also a deviant, and abused many prisoners sexually. Prisoners referred to her as the beautiful beast or the blonde angel, and she wore expensive perfumes to torment the prisoners who were living in complete filth and who were suffering physically. Former inmates claimed that she was the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Her face was an angelic clarity, and her blue eyes were the liveliest and most innocent eyes imaginable. Another said it defied belief that such a pretty girl could be so cruel. When she walked through the camp with a whip in her hand, she was surrounded by a cloud of choice perfume. Irma Grazer would take things further, and batter and beat prisoners to death with her truncheon. She also walked around on patrol with dogs that had been trained to maul and attack prisoners on command, and at times these beasts killed some of the inmates while others watched. She enjoyed shooting prisoners in cold blood, and one of her favourite things to do was to order the women inside of her barracks to strip, and she then whipped them. One of her biggest offences was in taking part in the selections at Auschwitz. She patrolled the arrival yards when the trains came in, and selected women to be sent to their deaths for any reason. Jealousy played a big part, and if she thought an arrival was more beautiful than her, she would have them gassed instantly. Grazer also had many affairs with other guards at Auschwitz, and abused prisoners who were kept like slaves until she became bored. One of her favourite things to do, though, was to watch doctors perform medical experiments and operations. One doctor claimed that Grazer kicked the women who were being operated on, and she even became transfixed by what she was seeing, almost in a trance. She was evacuated from Auschwitz in January 1945, and she eventually arrived at Bergen-Belsen, an overcrowded, sorry state of a camp in which thousands of corpses lay everywhere. Even in the final days of Belsen, as the site was close to liberation, Grazer demonstrated unbelievable cruelty. But as the site was liberated, the British came across this young woman in her 20s, dressed in a uniform, and whom the prisoners described as a complete sadist and brute. They could not believe what they were hearing, but Grazer was in no mood to apologise for her crimes. She was cold and arrogant, and when she was brought to trial, she passed the blame to the head of the SS, Himmler, saying that Heinrich Himmler is responsible for everything that has happened, but I suppose I am as much to blame as the others above me. At the Belsen trial, Grazer showed no emotion, except when her sister gave a character witness testimony. Alongside many of her fellow guards, Irma Grazer was sentenced to death on day 54 of the Belsen trials. When she was informed that she was to be executed by hanging, she showed no emotion at all, but when she was taken back to her cell, it was claimed that she was found crying in fear in private. She applied for clemency, but there was no chance for mercy, despite the fact she was just 21 years old at the time. On the 8th of December 1945, months after the end of World War II, Grazer and the other condemned guards were moved to Hamlin Prison, where there was an execution chamber created for the Belsen executions. Days before the executions were due to take place, Grazer had a knock on her cell door, and she was led towards a room where she first met with British executioner Albert Pierpoint. After execution, Grazer was next, and she was fetched from her cell. Now, there were not a huge amount of witnesses inside of the execution chamber where the gallows stood. There were British judges and military officials who were there to oversee the proceedings. Albert Pierpoint personally went to each of the cells to collect the condemned. It was claimed that Irma Grazer stepped out. The cell was far too small for me to go inside, and I had to pinion her in the corridor. "Follow me," I said in English, and O'Neill repeated the order in German. Those being the words of Pierpoint. Her arms had been secured behind her back, and as she was led into the execution chamber, Grazer looked at the gallows, and she also looked at the witnesses and officials stood all around. She was probably terrified by what was going to come. One account says that she went to the gallows kicking and screaming, but another claims that she walked very quickly, almost running to the chalk mark on the trapdoor. Pierpoint then checked her arms behind her back, and he placed a white cap over her head, a hood so she could not see her final moments. After this, the witnesses gasped as they saw the noose Pierpoint had prepared, and he then secured this around Grazer's neck and made sure it was tight enough. She then uttered her final words of "Schnell," begging Pierpoint to be quick. It was then claimed that the drop crashed down, and the doctor followed me into the pit and pronounced her dead. After 20 minutes, the body was taken down and placed in a coffin, ready for burial. The execution of Irma Grazer was incredibly quick, and despite her brutality, what shocked many inside of the execution chamber was the age of her, and the innocence of her in that final moment. Despite the notoriety, they saw in many of their eyes a beautiful young woman in her early 20s take her final breaths. This for some was distressing, and it summed up the evils of the Nazi Party, how everyone, no matter their age, could be caught up in the terror of the regime. Pierpoint never forgot Irma Grazer. As he placed the noose around her neck and pulled the hood down over her face, she allegedly gave him an enigmatic smile, and this haunted Pierpoint. She was just 22 years old when she was executed. Pierpoint had performed his job successfully, and he had snapped her neck instantly, but she was also left for 20 minutes before she was cut down, and the noose would have been swinging from the crossbeam for a few minutes before it then came to rest. Irma Grazer was one of the most evil concentration camp guards of the Second World War. She had a victim list in her thousands, and either by her own hand or by sending victims to the gas chambers, many suffered and took their final breaths because of her.
Blast from the past.
Have you ever had sex before?
No.
Controlling and distorting time and space. They are openly telling us what they are doing. The key to the bottomless pit. They are trying to open a portal to another realm or bring something out into our realm. The bottomless pit. They are trying to let something out. And the Pope is ready to welcome extraterrestrials. The sculpture in the Vatican is called Resurrection. Does this look like Christ to you? They are trying to resurrect something, but it is not Christ, and they are not aliens. The whole alien deception has been programming us from the beginning to accept something other. Some kind of life that is not human, but something else. Look at the satanic symbolism at the ceremony dedicated to the opening of the Gotthard Tunnel in Switzerland. This was put on by CERN. Did you really think it was just a stupid Netflix series? And look who it is. Up to no good. Alice. Desperately trying to go into or get out of Wonderland. They are telling you what they are doing with Alice. Trying to go down into the rabbit hole. Into the bottomless pit. Through these experiments, they discovered something called the Rainbow Universe and Rainbow Gravity. More nonsensical bamboozlement concealing what they are really looking for. Return to ancient Norse cosmology. Can you see it? A rainbow bridge connecting our flat earthly plane, which they called Midgard, with another realm, a realm underneath. You did not notice the enormous trees before, did you? Heed it now. The underworld they called Hell and Niflheim. Niflheim is very similar to the word Nephilim. Hell is the same biblical hell, or what the ancient text called Sheol. The Rainbow Bridge also connects to Valhalla, the city of Asgard, or what is known as Heaven. A path to ascend to the Most High. It doesn't matter if you cannot move beyond your programming to conceive this as a real possibility. It doesn't matter if you believe in it. What matters is that they do believe in it, and they rule and own you. Stranger than fiction, a paradox. The deeper down the rabbit hole, the more upside down everything becomes.